an average 5 kilograms per person consumption. You're talking about 0.4 in Africa.
That's because, historically, finished chocolate bars had to be imported from Europe, so they cost a lot. To create new demand in Ghana, Mitch is making a chocolate drink Lloyd hopes to sell in schools. He also hopes to source ingredients from inside Africa, dairy from Egypt and sugar from South Africa. To train talent in Ghana, Farafreak started this lab and hired locals to develop new flavors. And for farmers, advocates want to raise the cocoa price floor to about $3,100 a metric ton. And they want big chocolate companies to foot more of the bill. Nearly every big chocolate producer has programs set up to lift farmers out of poverty. But by some estimates, 73 to 90% of Ghana and Ivory Coast cocoa farmers are still below living income standards.
If you're the CEO of these big companies, it's time to come down and look at these yourself.
As the industry is set to grow about 5% in the next 6 years, Ghanaian cocoa farmers and processors are vying for a larger stake in the big business of chocolate.
Yeah, Ghana hano anka cocoa companies and now chocolate wanga waya chocolate we do ampo emra country hana wambe processing cocoa no na cocoa na ye dua ye di ya ho de ye ho adwuma no dodo no nyina ye ho adwuma wo Ghana ha ebebua ye ebebua oman no.
Can we also be allowed to add value? It will be changing the lives of the people that play real roles in growing the bean.
These bakers in Ukraine make 700 pounds of Passover matzahs a day, even as Russian forces advance. When we filmed at the Tiferes Hamatzos bakery, the city of Dnipro wasn't invaded, but it was surrounded by war zones. For many here, making this sacred bread feels more important than ever.
Да еще плюс у нас через несколько дней будет святой праздник, праздник Песах.
This would have been illegal back when their country was part of the Soviet Union. At one point, Jews were jailed for making or even just eating matzah. But these days, the country supplies an estimated 20% of all handmade matzah to the US market.
And now we're back again, sending out the best matzah, the real matzah, throughout the whole world.
Still, more than half of Americans buy matzah that comes off an assembly line. The last family-owned matzah maker in America, called Strites, can produce up to 1 million square-shaped sheets in a day. And it's been at it for nearly a century. Whether it's machine-made or handmade, many Jews have dedicated their lives to preserving what they call the bread of the poor. So how did this traditional food grow into a $110 million industry? Handmade matzah, called shmora, or guarded in Hebrew, is what the Ukrainian bakery Tiferes Hamatzos specializes in making.
You have to keep and you have to secure the matzah.
This is Rabbi Meir Stomler. He inherited the business from his father 12 years ago. Today, he supervises the work in accordance with Jewish law. The bakery grinds the wheat on site, and Rabbi Stomler regulates the amount of heat and moisture to keep the dough from rising.
This is custom made for us, making sure it doesn't get heated too much. From the moment that the wheat is in the field, even if it has any contact with water, that is already a problem.
The unleavened bread is made of just 2 ingredients, flour and water. But making the dough is labor-intensive. Joseph says this helps him keep his mind off of what's happening outside.
Люди продолжают жить, опять продолжают выполнять наш святой долг работы мацапекарни.
It's all made by hand. It's going to take him about a minute until it's ready.
From there, it's a race against the clock because the dough has to make it to the oven in just 18 minutes so it doesn't rise.
When the Jews left Egypt, they didn't have time to bake their bread, so they had it very fast, and what they ate was matzah.
And everyone who touches the matzot until it's baked must be observant Jews. This metal rod helps workers knead the dough faster.
He's making sure that it's being well done, so this is a real piece of dough.
Then they roll it into long logs and flatten it out with rolling pins. When it makes it to the oven, it bakes fast.
Maximum 10 seconds, you'll see it's out of the oven, and this is a ready matzah to eat for the Seder night.
Production has been going strong, despite the Russian invasion. This would be unthinkable in previous generations. The city's chief rabbi, Levi Yitzchak Schneerson, was arrested and exiled in 1939 for providing matzah for the region's Jews. But since the fall of the Soviet Union, Dnipro now has the most Jews per capita of any city in Ukraine. The massive 7-branched menorah center and surrounding neighborhood has become a hub for war relief efforts. Russia has targeted Ukrainian missiles on the outskirts of the city, and Dnipro's airport was recently attacked.
They don't have time to be afraid. They're busy with saving lives, evacuations, humanitarian aid, making sure they get whatever they need, the medicines and food, and really saving lives 24/7. There's no time to be afraid. There's no time to think about it.
Rabbi Stombler, a member of the Chabad Hasidic movement, takes pride in contributing to this renaissance, with matzah made the old-fashioned way. The constant supervision and labor makes shmura matzah 3 to 6 times more expensive than machine-made. Even though the biggest shipments left Ukraine earlier this year, the bakery exports right up until the Passover holiday.
Это маца, которая отправляется в Америку. Очень вкусная, очень хорошая, очень тонкая. Всю мацу, которую мы делаем с любовью, отправляем в Америку.
Ukraine normally exports about 70 tons of matzah each year, but war is getting in the way. Rabbi Stombler said he had 2 containers full of matzah temporarily stuck at the ports in late February.
2 hours before the boat was supposed to leave, the war broke out. We released them, but it was too late to send them to the States. Some of them stayed over here, some of them we managed to ship to the UK.
This kind of handmade matzah nearly disappeared after World War II, when mass-produced ones became more affordable. It was the son of the same rabbi arrested in Dnipro who revived it in the 1950s. Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson was living in Brooklyn when he launched a campaign to distribute shmura matzah to Jewish families. And the number of people who eat shmura matzah continues to expand. America produced 1 million pounds of shmura matzah in 2017, and the market has grown 30% since then. But handmade matzah makes up just a third of all matzah sold in the United States. Mass-produced ones make up the bulk of the $110 million industry. Streitz is the last large family-owned matzah producer in the U.S. The company managed to stay afloat, but it had to relocate to this facility in Orangeburg, New York, in 2017, after running a factory in Manhattan for nearly a century.
The last day leaving the factory was a very sad day. We stayed probably longer than we should have, just out of nostalgia.
That's Aaron Gross, the great-great-grandson of the company's founder, Aaron Streit. Although the machines have been upgraded, he still uses the same recipe.
We're going to say it's about 200 pounds of flour, 70 to 80 pounds of water, depending on, humidity in the air.
My name is David Marvin. I work upstairs in the mixing room.
Just like at the handmade bakery, workers here have to beat the clock. The dough drops through a hopper to the floor below. Kosher laws require that the bowls be cleaned in between each batch.
Yeah, just water.
Just like in Ukraine, everyone who handles the dough from here is an observant Jew. During the run-up to Passover, there are 8 full-time rabbis at this facility, and some of the staff have worked here for decades.
Michael's worked here for 6 years. Oh no, 33 years.
You take care for baby, so I take care of this machine.
When something goes wrong, he springs into action.
And he drives me crazy because he's like, he'll feel it and be like, oh no, it needs a quarter pound more water. I'm like, Michael, quarter pound more water, and he's like, no, it definitely does.
This machine, called a rattler, adds a bunch of little holes.
So it's not like a lavash or a flatbread, then it cuts it in 6 rows. This belt here spreads it, and then it gets cut again and put into the oven. about 10 minutes into the process, and it's dropping into the oven right here. And it's going to cook for about a minute and a half, 740 degrees.
The finished matzah comes out the other side. At the Rivington Street factory, workers used to load the matzah by hand onto conveyor belts as it came out of the oven. But here, robotic arms get the sheets into boxes and out the door, just in time for the Passover holiday. So why go through all this trouble for a cracker?
They say most family businesses, I think, by the third generation usually screws it up. I'm fifth. So I think we hopefully got past that hump. It's a beautiful business. It's a very niche, unique business.
And is there room at the Seder table for both types of matzah?
We started as a ham bakery on Pitt Street, right? So I think the more people that are observing Passover and are celebrating the holiday, we all grow together.
In 2021, Florida had its worst orange crops since World War II. That's because this insect is waging a war on the state's valuable citrus trees.
So this tree is infected with citrus greening. It produces small, misshapen fruit. Just see the difference.
This disease can be a tree killer.
The insect spreads a disease called HLB, or citrus greening, and it's infected nearly every citrus grove in the state.
Less canopy, you can see there's just less foliage on the tree. You can see through the tree.
The oranges are still edible. The real problem is that citrus greening has slashed Florida's production by 78%. It's cost the state nearly $8 billion and driven many growers out of the industry.
You should go back in your mind 15 years to what this place once was, as a collection of varieties. This was full of beautiful green trees.
We've had freezes, hurricanes, but citrus greening has definitely been the most challenging issue we faced in my career.
This group of scientists is racing to find a cure, armed with some unique weapons.
This is about the size that we're going to put on most new trees now.
The researchers have helped growers produce oranges on the infected trees, but they haven't found a long-term solution yet.
We will have to live with the infected trees and just make the most out of them.
So can they keep this disease at bay before it wipes out the state's orange industry? We head to Florida to find out. Larry's a fifth-generation farmer in Fort Meade, Florida.
We've been growing citrus in my family since the 1850s. When I first started in the industry, citrus occupied over 900,000 acres in the state of Florida. In fact, some years we had too much fruit and market prices were depressed.
Just 15 years ago, his family packed 1 million orange cartons a year, mostly Valencia oranges, the big, sweet, juicy kind.
You planted a grove expecting that to last for multiple generations.
The first case of citrus greening was reported in China back in 1919. It quickly spread across the continent, devastating citrus groves in India and Saudi Arabia as well. No one knows exactly how the Asian citrus psyllid made it to Florida, but in 1998, it showed up on an orange jasmine plant in a backyard in Palm Beach County, and it quickly spread throughout the state on infected rootstocks. But it would take another 7 years before Florida's orange trees showed signs of greening.
It spreads throughout the state before you even know it's present.
And in 2005, Larry found his first infected tree.
It was a real challenge and an eye-opening for us. We knew what a threat it could be to our operation, and we were fearful there were more infected trees that just had not been detected.
At first, Larry tried removing all the sick trees, but the insect moved faster, soon infecting too many to control. When a psyllid munches on a citrus tree, it leaves behind the bacteria that causes greening, here in the vascular tissue. The bacteria replicates and blocks this important highway for moving nutrients. Underground, the root systems thin and die out. Above ground,
you notice the yellow pattern, the dark green spots.
If you can see me through the canopy of this tree, that means this tree is really, really sick.
While the trees do keep bearing oranges for a few years, the fruit essentially never ripens.
You see it's small in size, it remains green, and when I cut this fruit, you see an odd shape.
You can still eat the fruit, it's just not as sweet.
The orange juice from this fruit has lower sugar content or bricks than normal fruit, but there's nothing wrong with the juice. It's awful.
And 40% of those oranges fall off the tree sooner than usual.
the bacteria is actually starving and kills the tree over time.
Today, researchers estimate 90% of all orange trees in the state have the bacteria.
No longer do you see citrus trees abundant in the landscape.
Larry has kept his trees alive and producing for 15 years, using a combination of horticultural techniques developed by scientists at the University of Florida.
Some of our work that is going on right now is finding ways to keep those trees that do have the disease still producing fruit that are usable.
You guys want to see what some solids look like? All right. So they're very small. Ooh, there's an escapee. They're small, they kind of jump around a little bit. So we use this thing called an aspirator, or the more fun term we use with children is pooter. We just suck them up. It's basically a little vacuum in my hand.
Here, Lauren Diepenbrock can study the psyllids' movement to learn what might keep them off a citrus tree.
Using the aspirator is actually a really efficient way to collect psyllids.
She's figured out a few things that detract psyllids. First, this pink clay. It's sprayed on the trees to hide the leaves from the insect, which uses light wavelengths to seed. Study showed the clay was more effective than insecticides. The second thing Lauren is researching is these 8-foot wide sheets of plastic, called reflective mulch.
The idea is that it should make it where the psyllid can't find the host plant. It could be that it blinds them or causes a visual deterrent. How's it work? Somewhat. We do get psyllids. We do get them, but we do get them at a reduced rate.
A few years ago, farmers discovered that putting plastic bags around baby trees could help them grow stronger before infection. Lauren's now studying how effective these individual protective covers, or IPCs, actually can be.
So this is IPC mesh, and as you can see, there's little holes in it. You can see my hand very clearly. Wind, sun, rain, it all gets through here. The goal is to really keep that Asian citrus psyllid off the tree. And then if you look underneath, this is our irrigation.
The baby trees will grow in the IPCs for 2 years.
You can see that the trees aren't perfect. We're still going to have some stuff on them. We do have some pest issues in here, but they look really good compared to what's in the open field. And this will actually give our trees a fighting chance once they're out in the environment, and they could potentially get infected with sea lice.
Scientist Tripti Vashish thinks the key is in the soil.
We have been learning that the trees need these nutrients to fight infection. The citrus trees, because of this disease, have very small roots or fewer roots, so they are not very efficient in picking up the nutrients. It's like a job of 10 people needs to be done by one person, same with the roots.
She figured out that giving smaller doses of fertilizer and water more frequently helps the sick roots absorb nutrients better.
And it's similar like 6 small meals each day rather than 3 big meals are better. Same as with the fertilizer and irrigation, smaller doses are better than big doses.
Larry uses fertilizer custom designed for his trees. He's also planting more young ones.
One of our strategies for dealing with greening is to plant the groves at higher densities. We're planting 300 trees per acre compared to 140 to 150 trees per acre before we were dealing with the disease.
So if he knows all the trees will get infected, with more planted, hopefully some will survive. Growers have also tried releasing predator wasps and spraying insecticides. While there's no silver bullet, in combination, these short-term solutions have sort of worked.
You can slow down the decline.
We've been battling citrus greening for 15 years, and while the industry's not thriving, we're definitely surviving.
But the problem is, all these approaches tack on an extra $600 per acre onto production costs for growers.
Our revenues are down by more than half on an individual growth basis.
Growers are losing money.
And many couldn't swallow the losses. By early 2022, half of Florida's orange growers had left the industry. So while he waits for a long-term solution, Larry's taking a hit so he can keep harvesting the same way his family always has. Workers quickly pick the oranges and drop them in the bags. Once they've got a good batch, pickers dump them into baskets in the grove. Workers then truck the oranges to the packing facility just down the road.
We have 8 digital cameras that takes a picture of each piece of fruit as it travels through the packing line. We use an electronic sorter to divide the crop by color.
If they're orange enough, the fruit gets cleaned and hit with a layer of natural wax.
That preserves the fruit, it extends its shelf life.
Today, because of HIV, Larry packs half as many boxes as he did 17 years ago. If the oranges are a bit too green, Larry knows they'll be hard to sell on the fresh side. So he sends them to get juiced at the Florida's natural plant in Lake Wales. Larry owns the juicing plant along with other local growers as part of the company's cooperative.
About 90% of the fruit grown in the state goes to orange juice.
But just like growers, the factory has been getting fewer oranges.
So less efficiency in the plant.
With a lower fruit volume, the factory had to shut down one of its 3 processing lines. Nowadays, 60,000 boxes of oranges arrive at the plant from cooperative farms across Central Florida. That's about 30,000 fewer than before HLB.
Within 24 hours of harvesting, we juice the fruit.
This machine squeezes the juice out of every orange.
We pull out any seeds, and we also collect the pulp where we can add that back to whatever degree we want to do that.
The juice gets pasteurized and then pumped into cartons. But remember, greening affects oranges' natural sugar content. So Florida's Natural has to blend infected oranges with sweeter ones from different regions or even seasons. It still tastes like orange juice, it's just not quite as sweet. Today the factory pumps out about a third less than pre-greening.
They need a home for the fruit where they can get maximum value that hopefully can sustain their operations until a solution to greening is found.
Many scientists believe the long-term solution lies with re-engineering nature, either genetically changing the bug itself or naturally breeding citrus trees.
Ultimately, a tree that's resistant or tolerant to disease will be key.
That's the project Fred Gemitter and his team are working on at the University of Florida. They're trying to breed for an HLD-resistant orange variety, meaning even if the disease shows up, the tree won't get sick. To do that, he takes 2 different types of trees, maybe one with yummy oranges, and one that's resistant, and essentially has them mate. And their kid will hopefully still taste good, but won't get HLD.
Citrus green research.
But that's not easy. Finding a resistant orange is like looking for a genetic needle in a haystack.
Anh chị em lượt đây không bà lo nhặt tiền ở đi ra rồi chính thế nhá. Không cày nổi.
And we're trying to access those resistant types by making crosses.
Fred says it could take more than a decade.
So it's long term. There's always an element of serendipity in this.
But armed with that miracle-resistant tree, they could be better prepared to tackle future diseases.
It's a global, interconnected world we live in. People and plant diseases move about pretty freely, and so there will be another problem, another disease come along.
I believe science will continue to deliver new tools that will make growing citrus easier over time. I look forward to those days. I'm sure we'll have other challenges that we'll face in time, but today citrus greening is here to stay.
India is one of the world's largest producers of salt, and a third of it comes from deep in this desert. The dry, cracked land of Little Ran of Kutch was once a seabed. Today, over 6,000 families live in this desert, farming salt by hand. They're known as the Agariyas, and they've been salt producers in this harsh environment for generations. The air can reach up to 118 degrees Fahrenheit. And the land they work on is so salty. All to earn just $4 a ton. That same salt will sell for $260 a ton as table salt, soap, or detergent.
मेहनत इतना करता है अगरिया, इसको इतना पैसा नहीं मिलता जितना कि वो इंडस्ट्रीज वाला है, वो पैसा इन्वेस्ट करके मुनाफा कमा रहा है.
The Agariyas have faced a long history of mistreatment.
But that stigma continues, and this is why, the salt farmers still continue to do this job.
There have been government efforts to change things in recent years, but many still live in poverty. We went to India to learn how the Agariyas became trapped in a big business of salt. Thousands of years ago, this area was part of the Arabian Sea.
अपना जो सौराष्ट्र और कच्छ लेकिन जो चेंज हुआ काफ़ी साल पहले, उसमें सौराष्ट्र का प्लेट ऐसे डाउन हुआ और कच्छ का ऐसे डाउन हुआ, तो बीच वाला पार्ट ठीक हो गया और वो डेजर्ट बन गया.
It was still waterlogged as part of the Indus River Delta, but an earthquake in 1890 changed the direction of the river.
and therefore this entire area got dried up.
But the water that still sits underneath the mud is 10 times more saline than seawater, making it a perfect place to farm salt.
It was considered as a commodity which is equivalent to gold.
And the Agariyas have been working here ever since. Monsoons fill this area with water starting in June. It can take another 4 months for the waters to recede.
That is when the salt farmers come
Bhavna Harchandani is a research scholar who lived with the salt farmers for 7 months. The Agariyas arrive every year in October.
પહેલા મહિનામાં તો અમારે ગારા કામ જ કરવાનું એટલે રણ ભર્યું હોય એટલે અમારે પહેલા ચાલીને જવું પડે 1 મહિનો.
Patadia Gugapai and his wife carry everything they'll need to live in the desert for the next 6 months, including supplies to make their huts, clothes, farming tools, and all their food.
Tuần này cảm giác lâu rồi đấy.
કારણ કે આવા જવામાં તો મોંઘવારી પ્રમાણે જોવા જઈએ તો ઘણું મોંઘવારી વધી ગઈ છે એટલે
Tuần này chúng ta sẽ đi picnic.
First, they have to find the key to this
Mọi người có ai nói gì đâu.
salty
Hỏi
brine
tao.
water underground. They dig 30 feet into the
Anh
mud
thấy
to
chúng
get
ta đi picnic.
Digging wells can take up to a week. The families then set up these government-subsidized solar panels. They'll power the pumps that bring brine water to the surface. Then the Agariyas build salt dams, these expansive salt flats.
જ્યારે અમે રણમાં પર્વતમાં આવી કામ
Có làm được đâu. Thế bảo đi chơi là thích hơn.
ત્યારે બધા રોલ ફેરવો પડે.
The roller helps
Bảo nó
them
cứ lâu lâu lướt điện thoại mà lười vãi chừng ra.
રોલ ફેરવી એટલે જમીન મજબૂત બની જાય.
Phải đi chiều.
Điện cũ
They'll
mang
make
đồ
10 to
về.
20 pans, all by hand. It's backbreaking
Điện
work.
cũ mang đồ về trên các bằng mang về mà.
Mang đồ về nhưng mà chúng tôi quá.
Everyone in the
Cái
family
mâm nào mà
participates
còn
to
nhiều
help.
đủ mẹ của túi hết thì à.
Để quật tôi tất cả ra.
Then the farmers will release the salty brine
Trên
water
tao
from
đấy
the
gọi là
pans
phong tục rồi.
between pans. By the last pan, the water reaches the 24%
Tao là ăn cửa nhà
salinity
hàng là
needed
phải
to
mang
form
về
big
hết, không để
salt
sót gì
crystals.
cả. Bọn nhà hàng bảo là
The
chỉ
farmers
biết
are so
cái
skilled
không.
that they know it's the perfect
Trên tao đấy
salinity
gọi là phong
simply
tục
by
rồi.
tasting the water.
Ở dưới này mình mới thấy là không mang về thôi.
Bởi vì á thì cũng được mang về mà chỉ mang về trứng cút thôi.
Trên tao
Đấy là
kiểu
mọi người ngại không lấy chứ.
trên chỉ kiểu miếng to to ấy, không ăn được lúc đấy xong mang về nhà ăn. Cho vào túi đi xong mang về nhà ăn. Những cái miếng như kiểu ba chỉ hoặc là
Rồi
miếng
hiểu đấy.
gà hay là miếng
Ở trên này mỗi lần đấy là van này mọi người mang về không thức ăn bỏ hỏng hết.
Vác cái túi tải ta lên cân.
Too expensive
như
for
kiểu
the
trong Việt
farmers.
Nam đều thích ăn.
ફેરવવું પડે એટલે હાથે નાથે રિપેરિંગ
Trên
કરી
đấy toàn kiểu thế, nhưng mà đa số toàn
Nhưng
người
mà
già.
trong đấy người ta ăn toàn ăn sớm,
Này.
ăn 7 giờ người ta đã ăn rồi, ăn xong người ta phải đi làm
Every
nữa.
day for the first 3 months.
Mình ăn chiều thì cũng phải ăn trưa thì tầm 7 giờ.
Chỗ nào ăn cỗ cưới
They
toàn
start raking early each morning to
Tầm 10
avoid
giờ
the
đã.
hottest part of the day.
Cái này còn người lại có sống.
જો પહેલા તો મીઠું ઓછું હોય એટલે તો એક જણો ખેંચે એટલે હાલે એટલે અને બીજા પછી વધી જાય ને મીઠું પછી એક થી નંતરો હાલે ને પછી બે જણાને ખેંચો.
But working here can be really dangerous. The life expectancy of a farmer is about 60 years, because not only do they face extreme temperatures,
They're dealing with subsoil
Làm ở đây
brine
á?
which is highly acidic, and you also and exposure to that subsoil brine
Bình
also
thường mỗi
has
ngày đã
like
thường
a
là
lot
trăm rồi.
of problems in
thường mà
skin.
chỉ đi xúc mấy cái không phải là gì khó như thế này đâu, đi xa nó cũng
Nguy hiểm ấy.
thì
Thì nó
là
mới được
30-40
trả
triệu
mức
một
cao.
tháng đi làm vậy phải cao hơn, leo tận sườn đồi.
Sườn núi thứ lại nguy hiểm ấy trưởng nha.
Cậu ta làm
years
mà.
of the bright sun
Cậu ta làm
reflecting off the white landscape. And because they're so far from the nearest village, accessing
rồi
medical care
ăn
is
uống
often
gì
too
trên đấy người ta bao nuôi hết,
Sợ mà.
phải tiêu tiền.
Còn gì? Nguy hiểm mà.
Bị trượt đánh ấy.
Đây này. Ui.
Đây là cái vụ đấy thôi.
Despite these conditions, the Agarias live and work out here until spring, when the salt is finally
Người
ready.
chả còn gì nữa luôn.
They harvest 3 times. The first produces the best quality salt.
Nhưng mà ở trong
They leave
máy
in
xúc
April,
nó có cái túi khí
usually
mà
with
ăn nó
over
bốc lên là
1,000
được.
tons of salt. And they'll sell it
Mà
to a trader.
với này
Không
còn
có đỡ gì
còn một
cả,
tí
mẹ
nữa
thế
thôi.
thì đỡ đâu.
रण में से लेता हूँ खरीदता हूँ खुद का कोई
Mẹ nhìn
प्रोडक्शन
chúng
नहीं
có
है
cái áo ấy
अगर
trưởng
यहाँ
nó
से मैं
từ
खरीदता
tầng
हूँ
này tầng 1 nhưng đi xuống
His
còn
team
mấy
picks
tầng
up
nữa.
the harvest with
Nhìn cái
trucks.
tầng đường là trùng cái sợ áo ấy.
Once it
Nhưng chỉ
arrives
có mỗi
from
chục cái
Iran,
như thế.
उसको हमारा ऊपर में डालते हैं
Thề luôn.
Nhưng mà bên trên nó
उसको
cũng đi
क्रशिंग
được ô
करके
tô xe
दोनों
máy.
Thì mới bảo đây là tầng 1 của tòa này nhưng mà đi xuống
सैंडविच के
nhìn xuống
अंदर
dưới
नमक
đấy còn một
डालते
tòa
हैं
nữa.
सैंडविच
Một
में
tòa nữa.
पानी अलग कर देता है नमक
Thật.
अलग कर देता है
Nhìn
Đi
cứ
từ
đi
đường
xuống
đấy
xuống.
thôi.
Chắc mình bị lạc mất. Xong rồi nó comment bảo mẹ làm shipper đấy chắc cũng
he
phải
says
mấy
he
chục năm
loses
mới đi
about
đường quen
20%
được.
of the salt during the washing and draining
Hôm nọ
process.
mình vừa xem ở đây quay ảo ma.
फिर उसको हम उसमें अंदर आयोडीन डाल देते हैं आयोडीन डाल के उसको क्रशिंग करते हैं
It gets packaged and sold as edible powder salt and as crystal salt to be made into soap, detergent, and baking soda. This whole process refines the salt and makes it more valuable. So Rafiq can sell his product for upwards of 60 times what the farmers make. Bhavna says in the time she lived there, she saw salt traders working together to pay as little as possible.
If I'm a farmer, if I go and see that
Mà mẹ Việt Nam mình hết dịch từ lúc nào rồi?
he will say, okay, don't give me your produce,
Bây
give
giờ
it to
vẫn
someone
còn
else.
đang phong tỏa.
And then that man, the trader, will go and tell the other trader, if this man comes to you, don't take his produce.
Rafiq denied taking part in such practices and says farmers can negotiate their prices.
अगर ये लोग हैं वो जिसको समझो जिसको देना होगा वो देगा ऐसा कोई बंदी का नहीं कि मेरे को देना पड़ेगा दूसरों को भी देना पड़ेगा
Rafiq says he pays the farmers above average, between $5 and $8 a ton, but Insider could not confirm that. And most farmers we spoke to said that this season's market price for salt is between $2 and $4 per ton. That means in a good year, a family will earn just over $4,000 for 6 months of grueling work. But this doesn't pay for all the expenses they have as they prepare for the next harvest. So at the start of each season, many agariyas have to come back to traders like Rafiq and ask for a loan to help them get through it.
However, that taking advance has now made them fall into the vicious trap of loans and debts. This is the reason why they are unable to come out.
That means in a good year, a family will earn about $2,000 for months of grueling work. That's well below the poverty line. The agariyas have never really had control over the salt they farm. The British classified the group under the Criminal Tribes Act of 1871, basically branding all members as criminals from birth. But many historians say it was really a way to control tribes that were poor, low caste, or didn't support colonial rule. The law gave police the power to monitor the agariyas' movements and arrest them with little cause. The British also owned this land, so even though the farmers were still allowed to work here, the British would take the salt to England, process it, and sell it back to Indians with a heavy tax.
The salt farmers, they were not supposed to take their salt out from the region. So what the women used to do, they used to hide the salt crystals in their petticoat, and then they would take it out because salt was expensive.
Many Indians couldn't afford the taxed salt, even though it was a staple in their diet.
If you cut off the salt supply, it's like, you are waging a war.
It got so bad that in 1930, Mahatma Gandhi organized one of his most successful acts of civil disobedience, a 240-mile salt march.
As he moved from town to town, it seemed that all of India was behind him.
60,000 protesters were jailed, including Gandhi himself. Salt would be contested until India's independence in 1947. After British rule, the agariyas were denotified, meaning they were no longer classified as a criminal tribe.
But that stigma continues.
With few other options, they were trapped, producing salt.
This is why, the salt farmers, still continue to do this job.
And they're still working on land they don't own. After the British left, the little Ran of Kutch was taken over by the government, which leased it to the Agarias.
However, the government has stopped renewing their lease.
And in 1972, most of the area became a protected wildlife sanctuary.
Therefore, they are illegally producing salt. They are considered as illegal.
But the government has an unspoken agreement with the community, allowing them to keep farming around the protected areas. The government even provides equipment, like the subsidized solar panels and boots to help protect against foot infections. In the long term, the salt farmers and their advocates hope for more government involvement, starting with setting a minimum price for salt. Ecologist Ajay fears that might backfire.
सॉल्ट फार्म बढ़ने के कारण इकोलॉजी पे ये असर हो रहा है कि पूरा जो ग्राउंड वाटर है वो भी धीरे धीरे कम होता जा रहा है। अगर ऐसे ही रहा और ऐसे ही इंस्ट्रूमेंट से लोग सॉल्ट बनाते हैं और अगर सॉल्ट फार्म ज़्यादा बढ़ रहे हैं तो ये भी हो सकता है कि आज से 20 साल के बाद शायद ग्राउंड में पानी ही नहीं रहेगा तो यहाँ पे शायद सॉल्ट भी नहीं बनेगा।
As their own farming depletes the brine, the Agarias are moving deeper into the desert, further away from established towns and villages.
Probably we can at least provide them with minimum water facilities so that, at least they have some amenities.
But until help arrives, these people will be back next season.
Brazil nuts don't come from farms. They're collected deep in the Amazon rainforest, often by indigenous people.
Desde o nosso antepassado já trabalhamos.
But harvesting them is not easy. Collectors gather, crack, and haul 110-pound loads out of the jungle.
Se bater na cabeça, pode até levar à morte.
But this industry nearly collapsed 20 years ago when middlemen paid farmers just pennies per kilo.
A família também não ia no mato, né? As castanhas praticamente estragavam no mato.
So harvesters banded together to sell directly to factories, increasing their income significantly. Now the industry is at risk again. This time because of deforestation. We visited the Apiaca tribe to see how they saved this big business once before and if they can do it again. Almost every other nut that you can buy in a store comes from massive plantations. But Brazil nuts can only be foraged in the wild. They grow across this region, spanning Brazil, Bolivia, and Peru. The industry supports 60,000 families in the Brazilian Amazon. Many are indigenous. Villagers say 95% of their community works in the industry during the season. Each morning, workers load up their dinghies. They commute 10 miles along the Rio dos Peixes. Then they hike into the rainforest. Evanuson Krishi Morima is the president of the Apiaca tribe.
Mas para identificar outra pessoa que está a longa distância, para a gente saber a direção certa.
They're headed to Brazil nut trees that grew thanks to these guys, the agoutis. The rodents bury the fallen pods to eat later.
So when the rodent has a bad memory, they will be an eater. If the rodent is eaten by a jaguar, they will be an eater.
The Brazil nut trees can live to be 500 years old. They reach 165 feet tall, as high as a 15-story building. And their trunks over 6 feet wide.
Because they are usually above every other trees in the canopies.
Collectors wait for the pods to drop naturally between November and May. That's what makes this such a sustainable nut. Each tree drops about 300 pods every season, and they can come down at 50 miles per hour.
If you are down there and one of these things fall in your head, you're dead.
Catado ouriço por ouriço. Vou fazer montinho e jogar lá no...
Then they get to work cracking.
Como a minha cortei meu dedo, né? Dentro de chouriço tem aproximadamente varia de 15 a 30 castanhas dentro.
They make their way back, this time carrying bags that are roughly 100 pounds.
Pega uma caixa de supermercado e lava a castanha.
Workers will spread them out on beds to dry them in the hot sun.
Depois da secagem, a gente pode embalar. Coloca num saco limpo.
The Apiaká once numbered in the tens of thousands, but they haven't had an easy past, facing massacres, persecution, epidemics, and enslavement from rubber tappers. And now there's less than 1,000 Apiaká left. In the 1900s, they started selling and exporting nuts to Europe. They depended on middlemen from big cities who made the trip to their remote village to buy nuts for just 6 cents a kilo.
Não tinha ninguém para recorrer, era o jeito de entregar a nossa produção com um preço bem mínimo, né?
It wasn't lucrative enough, and many families left the industry altogether.
It collapsed big time. And the price of the nuts is so low, then it is not an incentive to people to harvest it.
While agricultural cooperatives aren't a new concept, environmental technician Antonio Vieira thought it might work for the Apiaká. So he joined 4 tribes across Mato Grosso into one cooperative called Copavan. The collectors would then sell directly to the cooperative, cutting out the middlemen completely. And the idea saved the local nut industry.
Sợ mẹ luôn.
E hoje em dia já estão trabalhando com...
Không, ta buồn cười với cả bánh như này em thấy là tụi mẹ của bánh nha thôi.
It may not sound like much, but it's more than a 2,000% increase from the 6 years collectors.
Bánh như này, cả bánh như nó lệch mẹ ra
đấy mà. Ra đây buồn cười quá chứ. Đâm mẹ ở mắt con chạy luôn. Đấy, sợ vậy.
Của mẹ rồi.
Mẹ nó chạy mẹ luôn.
Transfer them to the dryer. They'll stay here for
Mẹ
10
nó
to 12 hours.
Lá é colocado lenha, mandou vapor pra cá, secou.
Không nghe tỉnh phết. Chuyện đi đâu xuống xe chạy luôn. Thấy buồn cười, thằng bé nó chạy xuống.
The factory tries to
Không
stock
mẹ
up,
con gì cả.
so they have enough supply to last the 6 months of the off-season. They're dried again for 4 days to extend the shelf life. Then they had to get steamed to loosen up the shell.
A gente leva para torragem e depois elas voltam para fazer a seleção final, que é o processo de tirar casquinhas, ver se tem alguma danificada, separar o lixo da inteira e fazer empacotamento que é para levar.
Although harvesting them is labor intensive, Brazil nuts are used to fill space in bags of mixed nuts.
I personally like
Sợ quá, đừng xem cái đấy não là kinh vậy, đẹp quá rồi.
Chia những nhân này là đẹp người, những cái nhân
It processes 370 tons of Brazil nuts a year in this factory.
Ông việc bắn hết cả lên kinh ngay.
Brought Apiaká families back into the industry. The nuts will get packaged and sold to be used in snack packs, chocolate bars, and cakes. Some of the biggest customers, the US, Netherlands, and Germany. Now, the industry is facing another challenge: deforestation.
Esse trabalho todo, ele pode se acabar, entendeu? A floresta acabando, a gente não tem como continuar.
Nearly 5 million acres of the Amazon were cleared in 2021 to raise cattle and grow soy, African palm, and corn.
What they want is land.
Chưa thấy lâu là thấy ai có tai nạn với ngựa.
They are not after the woods.
The state of Mato Grosso has one of the worst rates of deforestation in Brazil. And the Apiaká don't have enough resources to protect their land themselves. Now the government does protect Brazil nut trees, meaning it's against the law to cut one down. That's why you'll see single Brazil nut trees standing alone in fields.
Brazil nut trees depend ecologically.
Mà thấy sợ vào mấy cái đường nó nung vào nông thôn mới mà nằm ở đường tiết ra đeo từ cái bờ cái xuống cái ruộng cao hơn mét rưỡi, đường cao ấy trở ra nhưng mà buổi tối mà thấy thầy rượu và phì một phát không nghỉ cao mà cái đường từ cái ruộng lên cái mặt đường này cao ấy trở ra.
One way to do that is by investing more in diversified final products like this nut oil. The oil sells for double the price of raw nuts, and making it saves broken nuts from going to waste. It's used in everything from food to cosmetics. Advocates say the solution could also be as simple as marketing. By some estimates, locals could earn 3 times the profit from Brazil nuts than from illegal logging. Brazil nuts are also one of the most sustainable nuts. And growing this industry could give locals a reason to preserve their ecosystem.
Essa árvore é super importante para essas comunidades. Hoje é fonte de renda.
And that's the value and the magical thing about Brazil nuts is that by consuming every nut, we are protecting forests. And we are doing our little bit of actually saving the Amazon.
This isn't snow. It's limestone. And miners risk their lives to carve it out of the white quarries of Egypt. The valuable rock is at the center of a huge industry. It's used to make everything from cement and glass to plastic and tiles. It's even what the great pyramids are made out of. But digging up and cutting these precious blocks is very dangerous. Miners face clouds of dust that can cause diseases. And they work with sharp blades under the brutal sun.
Hôm nay nó không còn được nhiều cọng như mọi hôm rồi.
Degrees Fahrenheit. And all they have to protect them is a cloth mask. Atif Fatih Zaki has been working here since he was just 14 years old.
واحد رجله تتقطع، ممكن واحد ايده تتقطع، واخد بالك ممكن واحد صباعه يتقطع، فتلقى يعني خطر كثيره مش قليله.
All for a wage of just about $6 a day. But in this area, it's one of the only available jobs.
عايز تصرف عليهم وتوكلهم وتشرب، مضطر تعمل كده.
The government has tried to crack down on mines after a slew of deaths. But many are still operating, even illegally. We head to Egypt to see just how bad mine conditions are and learn why miners take the risk anyway. About 160 miles south of Cairo sits one of the largest limestone deposits in the world. This is Alminya, Egypt, and hundreds of mines dot the landscape. Tens of thousands of freelance miners chip away at this land. For these guys, each day starts in Minya City at dawn. And this is where the danger begins. These trucks aren't meant for passengers. Workers have gotten injured from falls along the winding journey.
وعربية صندوق يعني كده، نتجمع كلنا مع بعضنا في العربية، فبنبقى مجمدين يعني ببعضنا.
The trip to the mountain takes about 40 minutes.
الجبل حوالي الساعة 6 الصبح بالضبط.
The workers first share a meal while the sun rises. Then it's time to get suited up. Since these miners are freelancers, they have to buy their own protective gear. Often, homemade cloth masks, gloves, and sunglasses are all miners have to shield them. They grab their tools and descend into the pit. The most important one is the round saw, and that's also the most dangerous. First, miners have to set up these 2 rails. 2 separate machines roll along the tracks. They slice the stone into perfect cuboids beneath.
دي فصلت في الأول، دي بتشتغل 20 مرة 40 ومرة 20. الحشاشة بقى بتحش البلوكة من تحت وبتربعها.
The machines move quickly. They're really heavy and they're loud.
اصبر الصوت، واخد بالك؟ زي ما نكون احنا اتعودنا عليه خلاص. يعني بقى لها 25 سنة في شغلانة، 20 سنة، 15 سنة، فأنت تأقلمت على الصوت.
Workers shout at each other to warn the machines are nearby. Because the real hazard is those saws. Quick step, saw that separates miners from razor-sharp blades.
لازم يكون عينك تكون على الموس وهو شغال. الموس وهو شغال لو خبط حد وهو بيلف هيموت على طول.
Miners are responsible for fixing the machines when they break and sharpening the blades by hand. That's also risky work.
دي بتركب في المكنة. بركبها المكنة واربطها ب4 مسامير عشان الموس ما يفلتش من المكنة يعور حد. واخد بالك؟ فكل مدى كده كل نص ساعة ساعة لازم نسنه بالصاروخ واخد بالك يطيب عشان يسرع أكتر.
The cutting machines used to have coverings, but they fell off years ago. Now the blades are exposed.
لو غطيناه مش هنشوف. طب احنا هنعرف ازاي المقاس اللي احنا عايزينه، هنعرف ازاي الشغل اللي احنا عايزينه.
While the mine owner says he makes sure the electrical wires are covered, many are unprotected.
توصل توصيله بتاعتك، لازم انت تبقى عارف الكابل بتاعك، التوصيله بتاعتك عارفها ومتاكد منها، عشان كده لازم انت تبقى قدام عينك عريانه شايف.
As the machines cut stone, they kick up rocks in a haunting white cloud of limestone powder. If there's no wind, miners disappear in it, like ghosts. It's easy to inhale the fine dust. And if they breathe it long enough, it can cause a lung condition called silicosis.
صار التهابات على صدري، جتني حساسية من البودرة دي. أصعب شغلة دي في الصيف، بالنسبة لي مفيش هوا.
Injuries, sickness, and death in these mines are widely reported, but there aren't any official numbers. At one point, the life expectancy here was just 45 years old.
في ناس دراعتها اتقطعت من الموس، في ناس دماغها لا مؤاخذة الموس دخل فيها مات. ناس كتير بعيد عنك اتقطعت رجلها.
Zaki says many mine owners will offer under $200 by way of workers' comp.
التعويض ما يسكرش، بالنسبة لي لما تقطع رجله وما تتقطع ايده الرجل يتعوض ولا الرجل يتعوض ما يتعوضش.
Once the stone is safely cut, workers turn the blocks so the machine doesn't break them as it goes by again. At the start of a new quarry, the stones don't come out perfect. Those chunks head to a separate factory to be ground into powder. Perfectly cut stones that haven't been sold yet get stacked. But these blocks have already been purchased, so miners throw them straight into the truck. And they have perfect aim. If they're lucky, they might get a $3 stipend for food and tea on top of their $6 daily wage.
قاعد موت اديك ناظر اديك معنا الصبح وتعبان اديك شوف يا دوبك تستر البيت بس مش دايم اديك شايف الشغل. لا حسب الظروف، حسب ظروف الطوب. لو المحجر فيه طوب مفيش بيع، الطوب قاعد في المحجر بنقعد نستنى لما الطوب ده يتشال وبعد كده نيجي نشتغل تاني.
The bricks are sent to Cairo, which has around 80% of Egypt's limestone processing capacity. The limestone is made into cement and tiles and used in papermaking, plastic production, agricultural products, and even medicine. Globally, the limestone market hit an estimated $73 billion in 2020. Today, Egypt is the largest exporter of limestone in Africa, producing more than 150,000 metric tons. The stone is so lucrative that Nina's economy depends on it. That's why many miners do this work. Their $6 wage is more than they'll make farming or working in construction.
انت حط نفسك مكان انت راجل متجوز ومخلف ومعك عيال وعايز تصرف عليه، مفيش غير الشغله دي اسمها محافظه المنيا، فعشان كده ما تشتغل. هي مفيش غير محافظه المنيا جايه مع الشغله دي.
And more people, from students to farmers, flock to the mines when unemployment spikes.
متزوج وعندي بنتين وانا طبعا انا بعول الاسره طبعا.
But human exploitation for mining limestone in this area is not new. In fact, its history is ancient. Through the years, Egyptians used the stone in pyramids, temples, and tombs. Dark limestone made up the core of the Great Pyramids of Giza, and blinding white limestone once covered the outside, symbolizing purity and sacredness. Then, in 1303, an earthquake loosened the outer stones of the Great Pyramid. The white layer was stripped off to be used in the construction of mosques. Today, by one estimate, more than half the limestone quarries in Minya are unlicensed. The government has cracked down on some, closing 400 by 2019 after reports of injuries. But many illegal mines are still operating, with deadly conditions and no oversight. So, workers have had to take matters into their own hands. They negotiated a pay raise and created a fund for injured workers and their families. But they faced pushback from mine owners.
لا نأمن عليكم ومش هنأمن عليكم، ما فيش لا تأمين ولا في أي حاجة.
The mine we filmed is licensed, It's called Uncle Walid's. But the owner told Business Insider the miners still have to provide their own gear.
لا ما فيش امان، الامان عند ربنا وعينيك. انت مسؤول عن نفسك، انت لو تعورت ما حدش هيسال فيك. واخد بالك؟ صاحب المحجر ياخد يسال عليك مثلا اسبوع 2 3 وخلاص، شهر بالكثير وخلاص. لكن انت تسيب لنفسك والواحد يسيب لصحته وخلاص.
At the end of his shift, Atif relaxes with a cup of tea and a meal with his friends. The eerily beautiful mine stretches in front of them. It's a beauty they hope will get the world's attention, enough to send some help.
نعيش حلوين، مش عايزين غير لقمة العيش في الدنيا. الناس مش عايزة غير تاكل وتشرب وخلاص، عايشة زي.
At the beginning of the year, this Vietnamese town turns a sea of pink. About 70% of Nguoi Phu Phao village make incense sticks. That's about 3,000 households, all in preparation for Tết, or Vietnamese Lunar New Year, the country's most important holiday. Artisans here have made these colorful incense sticks for generations, but the industry almost didn't survive. Many young workers left for more lucrative jobs. Then in 2019, India, the village's biggest customer, restricted imports of Vietnamese incense sticks. So T had to change his production process and find within Vietnam. Through his cooperative, he's been able to stay afloat, crafting 50,000 sticks a day. We visited the village's largest factory to see how it's keeping the incense tradition alive. Incense sticks have the core stick and the incense powder.
Trên hương thì được làm bằng cái vầu cây lúa ở trên rừng.
Once the bark is harvested, farmers bring the bunches here to be weighed and sold. Just down the road, villagers carefully split the bark into smaller sticks and lay them out to dry in giant stacks around town. Next, they head to the chopper. With the machine's help, they can chop tens of thousands of sticks in a day. Which can be up to 16 inches long. Then they're trucked to T's incense factory. Here, workers sort the stems into bunches. Then they hand-dip the ends in colorful buckets of dye. They're dyed either pink, which represents the lotus, Vietnam's national flower, or red, for the country's flag. Carefully, the bunches are filled with chong. In preparation for the Tết holiday, workers blanket the village in these pink bunches.
Công nhân chỉ nhuộm buổi sáng và đến chiều là thu được.
Over on the other side of the factory, workers make the incense powder. In this village, locally harvested Canarium sap is mixed with charcoal for the signature black color. The exact proportions are secret.
Cơ bản là công thức đó được truyền từ các cụ của xưa để lại.
This mixture gives the sticks their fragrance when burned.
Trầm, bài.
Once the pink sticks are done drying, workers feed them into one of these machines. It automatically coats on the incense powder.
Xưa thì các cụ chủ yếu làm thủ công 100%, sản lượng rất đến 10 lần so với làm thủ.
Workers dry the sticks a second time.
Tôi tiến hành phơi trên càn phơi.
They need good temperature and lots of sun, because if the incense is wet, it won't burn.
Nói với bà cái đấy.
Phân tôi là có
Dạ, kiểu mình cháu dâu ấy chả ghé lại nói với bà làm đi.
Lựa chọn nhặt các hương nó lỗi.
Next, workers package up the sticks in plastic. Today, tea sells mostly to wholesalers within Vietnam, at 65 cents a bunch. But like most of this village, tea used to sell primarily to India, about 300 tons a year. Those sticks, used in religious worship, were shorter, and tea added no fragrance because Indian buyers preferred to add their own. India is Vietnam's biggest customer. By some estimates, 90% of India's incense imports came from Vietnam. But in 2019, India partially banned imported Vietnamese incense sticks.
Nói chung là sụt giảm rất nhiều. Bởi vì cái lượng xuất đi Ấn Độ nước ngoài là rất là nhiều.
Paired with younger generations leaving for other jobs, Hong Kong's incense industry struggled. Wanting to keep the century-old tradition alive, T got creative. First, he designed the product to better reflect Vietnamese tastes. He cut the sticks longer, dyed them pink, and added fragrance. Then he added machines to speed up production. The workers went from being able to make 500 sticks a day by hand to 50,000 using machines. T also worked with 12 other incense makers in the village.
Được thì ở các xã thì có đăng ký kinh doanh.
That way he could recruit more workers outside his village. Next, he set out to find new buyers inside Vietnam to replace his lost business from India. So T got his product registered with the National Office of Intellectual Property. Now his products are traceable with barcodes, making it easier to find domestic wholesale buyers. Today, T sells about 80 tons domestically each year. That's less than a third of what he sold to India. But he has ramped up production for Vietnamese customers. Now, his cooperative's factory is the largest in the village.
Nhưng mà em ở dưới này tầm thôi, như ở trên nhà chị ở lạnh đấy.
Biết là đến 5 đến 3 cái đơn vị nên là trên các cái tỉnh.
He now has enough capacity to prepare for his biggest event of the year, Tet. Incense sticks are used in religious ceremonies and temples year-round. The line of incense smoke is said to connect the spiritual world to this one.
Cầu cho một thế giới bình an, mọi nhà mọi người đều an lành mạnh khỏe, hạnh phúc, an khang thịnh vượng.
But come Vietnamese Lunar New Year, usually in January or February,
thắp nén nhang thơm để